let's watch this debate that Ethan Klein had with this EU dude.
Oh, I think he's connected.
Hello, baby.
Hey, there he is.
Hey, what's up, baby?
The newest member of the European Parliament, my friend. And
I'm a member of the European Parliament. I'm a member of the European Parliament.
how's it going? How is it all? Has it all paid off? Are you enjoying your new position? Is it time
Actually,
consuming?
yes. I think it suits me more than a YouTuber.
In what way?
Because I think about the world and interesting topics, and I'm passionate to, I don't know, be helpful in the world.
Right.
And yeah, in this way. Because as a YouTuber, I don't think I had that much impact as I have now with the videos as well. And sometimes with the videos that I'm making, I feel I have more impact in the European Parliament.
Interesting.
Instead of the stuff that I'm doing here, actually. Which
So
is
are you
interesting.
looking to-
Anyway, guys, I'm excited. I love you.
We love Big Fib. We love the energy that he brings. So is this the beginning of a new career, do you think? A lifetime career?
This is the beginning of a new era. YouTubers taking over.
Yes, we need more YouTubers in EU Parliament. We need PewDiePie representing Sweden. We need KSI representing England.
Yes.
UK is out of the European Parliament.
Right, you're right. Right. Good
I'm
riddance.
so knowledgeable, bro. Come on.
You're right. I'm late to the game on that one, my friend. So the reason that I wanted to talk to you is I saw your video about why you were voting the way you were regarding supporting the Ukrainians in the ongoing war.
Not because you love me. You wanted beef about the Ukraine and Russia.
I'm not beef. First of all,
war.
the only reason, the first reason, my friend, is from love, a place of deep love and affection. This is Team Big Fit over here, my friend. Okay. Yeah. But I've got a road into a member of the European Parliament. So let's parlay that into a convo.
Wow.
Yes, let's do it. But also, guys, I invited you to come here, and you didn't came. So the invitation is still here. We'll have 5 years of my mandate, so I'm waiting.
All right. Well, it's a big ask. I'm not gonna lie. It's a lot of
Okay.
you know. But
Let's jump into the topic. Russia and Ukraine, and why I voted for peace and not to keep supporting Russia with money and weapons.
or Ukraine.
Oh, Freudian slip there.
I mean, I'm assuming you don't want to send weapons to Russia, right?
Ukraine, yeah, you are right.
That would be a flip. Well, so here, let's start with, if you don't mind, I'll start with the video you made. We'll watch that.
Let's do it.
I do appreciate that you're putting out videos like this explaining your votes. I don't know how many members do that, but I do think I like the transparency of it, you know? So I think that's good. But here it is. Let me show the people the video. Pulling this up here.
Parliament, and today we're going to vote if the EU countries should keep sending weapons and money to Ukraine. And I decided to vote against. The reason is not because I'm against the people of Ukraine, but I'm against the escalation of war and the use of violence. But for peace to happen, I believe not only the EU and countries like the United States should stop sending weapons to Ukraine, but also the countries supporting Russia should stop sending them weapons.
Wow, you know, that I didn't think about that. Oh my goodness. Well, maybe the North Koreans should all go vote, you know, to change their government so that they will stop sending weapons to Ukraine. Yeah, I think that if we just get that to happen, then this works. Well, good luck.
We will never achieve peace through war. I believe to end this
What? you achieve peace through war all the time. We did it in World War II, and then we achieved European peace for, well, I mean, this is the largest war in Europe since World War II. But because of the foundations that were laid by seeing the war out and then trying to lay a good foundation and find a just, lasting peace, even though it wasn't just for everyone, you know, we were able to prevent another expansionist war of that style in Europe for about 75, 80 years. So, I mean, you know, when people say like, oh, you can't fight to a position of peace, I would also say that you can't just like, I don't know, just stop fighting and expect that to bring peace or a just peace. Because if you make conditions that are not, you know, productive towards Ukrainian prosperity by making them give up all their land, having all these displaced people not be able to return home, them having to demilitarize, which is still a Russian demand for them to even be able to have peace with Russia, is that they have to get rid of their armed forces, which is certainly something that the Ukrainians objected to back in March of 2022 and something that they still object to if they wanted to dissuade a future Russian invasion. Yeah, I just find this kind of naive.
Conflict, diplomacy, and peace talk between Russia and Ukraine is the only way. Even though I already made up my mind, I really want to know what you think. So share your thoughts in the comments.
By the way, I love how you're like, yo, tell me what you think. Not that it fucking matters. That was dope.
No, it does matter actually, because I'm putting polls and also about the Ukraine and Russia. What the people want, that they voted me, and majority of the people that voted for me, especially in my country, they are voting that they want peace talks and not for the European Union to keep funding. So it matters to me a lot, and it matters to the people that they voted for me. And I think that's something important. But I voted against sending weapons before I did these polls, which is
I see. It's already been, yeah, I see what you're saying. So
yeah.
I guess
Can I also just throw out there quickly, if somebody genuinely supports the Ukrainian people and they want what's best for them, how does you go sit down and you have this conversation between the Russians and the Ukrainians? And the Ukrainians are in the position where they're not getting support from the EU anymore. He's saying that America should stop, everybody should stop sending Ukraine weapons. And the Russian comes. Now, he could demand that North Korea stop sending the weapons. He could demand that the Iranians stop and that the secret drone program that Reuters is reporting in China doesn't have. He can believe that all he wants. The Iranians are not going to stop. The North Koreans are not going to stop unless there's some, you know, different factor outside of the moral revulsion that certain Europeans show. And so what would ultimately happen is the Ukrainians would go into negotiation with no support, and the Russians would go into negotiation as the largest country on the world, with one of the largest standing armies in the world, backed up by Iran, North Korea, and economically, and possibly with the drone program, if you believe the Reuters reporting, the Chinese. How are the Ukrainians going to walk away from that with a just peace that could be sustainable and not something that just reignites violence again if they're pushed into, for example, demilitarizing, which would lose their defense, which would mean they wouldn't have nothing to defend themselves with. And if the Russians believe, as Putin has said, that Ukraine does not have any right to exist outside of an extension of Russia, then you would just make them vulnerable for the next invasion. If you want a just and sustainable peace, Ukraine must negotiate from a position of strength that allows them to get the best deal possible for their own people, so there won't be a need to go back into fighting, either because the Russians think they can conquer the Ukrainians still, or the Ukrainians think that the current state of affairs is so disrespectful to certain basic human rights, as has been the case in much of occupied territory, that they have no choice but to resist violently. Because, you know, it's not just the Irish that know how to do car bombs.
my first question would be, as a Cypriot, how do you say it? Cypriot?
Cypriot.
Sick. That's the coolest one, probably.
Yes, my country is so irrelevant that you don't even know how to.
Well, no, it's tricky. It's a tricky one. You know, American, English, Cypriot.
Did you know my country before you met me?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
pretty good with European geography there.
Very good step. Okay, let's jump into the
So
real
my
talk,
first question
man.
is, as a Cypriot, do you support Turkey's annexation of northern Cyprus?
You use some difficult words that I'm not sure if I understand, but no, let's explain to the people that are watching also. So in 1974, Turkey invaded Cyprus, and in similar way that the Russia did the Ukraine as well. But because, and it was a lot of, in my country situation, it was 10 years kind of internal fights, civil war inside Cyprus, but there is no way of justification another country coming and invading my country. And this is, I assume, what you are going to suggest. What's the difference between Russia and...
Yes, if you don't support that, it seems that you should have even more sensitivity to this notion of a neighboring country coming and just grabbing territory from you without provocation.
I'm against this as well in my country, and I'm against
but what does it mean to be against something?
Invasion, and I'm against the invasion as well. So I'm not pro-invasion.
Right, but in a sense, they're...
What it means is thoughts and prayers, Ethan. What it means is thoughts and prayers.
The policies you're suggesting are to the benefit of Russia.
Okay, let's talk about, because nobody talks about this topic, especially about the Ukraine thing. It's also kind of a bi-communal problem, similar with Cyprus, because in Cyprus we have Turkish Cypriots and we have Greek Cypriots, and they were fighting kind of between. And also in Russia, in Ukraine, there are people...
Freudian slip.
That they are a lot more pro-Russian, closest to the Donbas regions, those regions that Putin invaded, and also closest to Kiev, they are more pro-Ukrainians, and so it's kind of, and also did a lot of, if we, let's say, make referendum to a country, to these Donbas regions, Mariupol and all these things, probably they will like that to be under Russia more than to be under Ukraine.
Yeah, but
they had this referendum already, and they voted to be part of Ukraine. The Donbass voted like over 70-something%. Both Luhansk and Donetsk to be part of it. Crimea voted over 50% to be part of it. And you want to know what the Russians didn't have? They didn't have a referendum. If you have a referendum right now, maybe that would be the case, but that's because everybody that was against the Russians in Mariupol and in Donetsk and in Luhansk had to leave because the ones that stayed disappeared. Or if they didn't disappear, they ended up in prison, or they've had to be in hiding for the last 8 years. My fixer, he's a displaced person from the Donbass. Rick the Ukrainian, he's a Ukrainian I've interviewed on the channel. He's a displaced person on the Donbass. Yes, once you use force and scare all of your opposition away, and then punish those who oppose you, then it's much easier for you to win a rigged election. I agree with that. But the idea that if you were to get all the displaced people and you were to have referendums in these places at the time that right before the Russians invaded, like if you were to have a referendum in Kramatorsk or Sloviansk before the Russians invaded in 2022, would they vote to be part of Russia? And Donetsk and Luhansk, he cannot say that probably. He's just saying probably because he knows that in eastern Ukraine, they speak a lot more Russian, and in western Ukraine, they speak a lot more Ukrainian. And to most people, from an outside perspective, it's as simple as you're dividing people's politics by their language. If they speak Russian, they support the Russians. If they speak Ukrainian, they support the Ukrainian. My fixer, I've never met somebody that is probably has more justified anger towards Russia. I barely hear him speak Ukrainian. It's mostly Russian because that's how he grew up and that's the language he speaks. Could you imagine if we were talking about the Irish and we went to the IRA and says it's weird that the Irish Republican Army supports independence? They're mostly speaking English. The people pick up their language in their youth. That doesn't necessarily mean it's tied to the politics. Do the ones that speak Russian, are they more likely to support Russia? Yes, but we don't have any hard data suggesting that in eastern Ukraine that the vast majority of people supported being part of Russia. So what he's saying probably here is pure speculation that I don't think is reflected in the data. It's not reflected in my personal experience, but that's my personal experience. I'm just one perspective in this war. Obviously, I've also met those who are of a different perspective, waiters. But most of the people that I have met that do support Russia are like above the age of 60 or 70. They're not people who have a future in the country into producing economic activity. And I'm not saying that to diminish their human rights or to diminish their opinion. I'm saying that because if you go to occupy Donetsk, there is nothing. There is no society, there is no civil society, there is no opposition, there is no job opportunities, and there are no young people. There are very few to no people in occupied territory that look like me. And I'm not saying look like me because, you know, I'm a Yankee long hair. I mean 23, 24, 25, 26. because all those people left, because all the opportunities left when the Russian army arrived. And so, you know, I think when you're a Ukrainian and you see what happened to the Donbass versus what happened in other territories that weren't taken over by the Russians, you might come to the conclusion that it might not even be best for the local community economically for the much more powerful country to take over. So when we say like the majority of these people support the Russians, probably, I just want to say this is pure speculation. Speculation that I'd like to see him back up.
But that's
So
not how
it's
it
like,
works. I'm sure there's like millions. It's not like if there was millions of Mexicans here in California and Texas and such, and they're like, hey, Mexico, come grab. It's like, that's just not
I don't like that Ethan granted him the framing, but I don't know how informed he is on this.
how it works. We have to respect
But
sovereign
they are a bit
borders.
oppressed. You know that they're a bit oppressed, actually, the Ukrainians that live closer to the Russian borders, because they are forced to have the language of Ukrainian, but so they speak. Everyone speaks Russian there, and they are forced, and it's kind of fun in the schools. They have Ukrainian books, and everyone speaks in Russian, and the teachers and all, and they are forced kind of to speak the.
I fail
language.
to understand how.
To be clear, then would we say that like the teaching of Irish, the mandatory teaching of Irish in Irish public education would be oppressive towards the primarily English-speaking population? Like when we say they're forced to speak the language, they're not forced to speak the language. It's that in educational materials, they're learning in the language of the country that they're in. In the government buildings, they had to speak Ukrainian, and then if the person speaks Russian, then the teller can speak the Russian. You might not even like these laws, but when you call this oppression relative to what? This is the problem I have sometimes when I debate or talk to libertarians. Like, for example, I'll be talking to them about like conscription policy and like the morality of conscription under certain conditions when your country is facing national security crisis, etc. And we're talking about like basic human rights. And we're talking on the scale of like, if your country's invaded and your people getting dumped into mass graves, is it moral to draft anyone ever? Right? And that's the moral conversation we're having about national survival. This is totally different than this. When we talk about bit oppressive, compared to what? In occupied Ukraine, there are no property rights for those who do not accept Russian citizenship. If you were just living in Ukraine, Mariupol, and many of these villages, it is primarily Ukrainian speaking. A lot of people don't know this. While it's true in the urban centers in Eastern Ukraine, it's primarily Russian speaking. And a lot of the villages, you'll find people that are like 80%, 70% speaking Ukrainian. It depends on the village, depends on the community. But the old stereotype is that Ukrainian was the backwoods, hillbilly folk language, while Russian was the cultured language of the intelligentsia, of academia, of the mechanisms of the state, right? But the reason that stereotype existed is because a lot of the villages spoke Ukrainian, and that's still true in a lot of these areas. But oppression, relative to what? The denial of property rights, the systematic torture that the UN alleges that the Russians are engaging in, the rape of women in occupied territory, again, alleged by the United Nations after multiple investigations. What about the renaming of all the local towns and villages into Russian? If you're saying that making people speak the language of your country in school, not even speak it, have textbooks in that language, that is oppression, then certainly cleansing the land and territory and villages of any ties to Ukraine or any Ukrainian language or culture or whatsoever, destroying all the monuments to the Holodomor and other, with that, like, when it comes to scales of oppression here, it's a little different, huh? You could say that, you know, a tax on somebody of 20%, that's a, I don't like taxes. That's oppressive in some way. You principally stand against taxes. Okay, when we talk about mass executions, there's a scale here, and we need to keep things in perspective.
And they are forced kind of to speak the
I fail
language.
to understand how that justifies Russian aggression.
No, it doesn't justify, and I am against the war. But here, this is what the data that we have. So we need.
He didn't cite any data. I don't know what he means. Like, most of them probably support being part of Russia. That's what the data. What data?
To start peace talks, because There are people dying. I'm like, this is okay. We're discussing. This is not funny. There are people dying every day, and I want less people to die. And I think this is for the good for the Ukrainian people to start immediately peace talks.
So
and
let
that's
me-
why
By the way, you're saying it's good for Ukrainian people. To be clear, signing away your home so you can never go back to the village that you went to and grew up, that you lived in as a kid, that isn't good for you. Okay? Not having a well-supplied army so you can defend your country against a neighbor that has invaded you time and time and time and time again throughout history, that's not good for your country. It's not good for your country to go into negotiations that is going to determine the fates of millions upon millions of people with no physical leverage while debating with a country that only knows one language, and it's violence when it comes to diplomacy. And when we're talking about the Russian government today, that's just the case.
why I'm voting.
Ever heard the term peace through strength? I mean, you know, it's a cliche, but it has some truth to it.
Well, on some of the things you said, I think there
By
was
the
some.
way, I never thought that we're going to have a debate
I know. How about
together.
this, right? This is great.
Wow.
I think there were some pro-Russian sympathizers in Ukraine. I think it's exaggerated how many. But ever since the invasion, that has shifted. Well, hold on, let me finish my point. That has shifted extraordinarily to pro-Ukrainian national identity. This whole notion that there's like a ton of Russian supporters in Ukraine, I think, is not correct.
Okay. Okay.
I didn't expect Ethan to reject the framing. Good job. I think he should have maybe given more detail, but I mean, it's first step.
I think you are wrong, and because now they don't have voice, there is war there. They're suppressed, so they can't.
Wait. No, back up. He said the data. Okay, now he's saying, well, we cannot truly know because they're all oppressed. So they were there before, and then the war happened, and then, you know, they all went underground, and we'll truly never know. So, but you said there was data, right? And saying this, it's a non-falsifiable claim that yes, actually a huge swath of the Ukrainian public do support Russia, and it's not a small percentage in some frontline villages. It's a huge swath, okay? And you have data to support that? Because if you're just saying, oh, they're all underground, well, it's non-falsifiable. Then I could say in the United States, there's a huge population that want the South to rise again, and they're going to do Confederacy too, but you can't poll them because the government will then send the FBI agents after them and they're scared of answering questions. Well, then it's non-falsifiable. There's no way for me to like test the theory. You could look at some pre-war data, but also to assume that the data would not change after the largest mass graves in Europe since the Yugoslav genocides get uncovered in places like Izium. I think that's silly. Like the city of Kharkiv used to be considered a center of pro-Russia support. The city despises the Russians now. Why would they despise the Russians? Because the Russians shelled the city and punished them for not submitting at the start of the war. And I think, you know, losing your uncle, losing your father, using your brother to Russian targeting of civilians, or the bombing of, for example, civilians in Kherson when they were pushed out of the city, these actions have an impact on public opinion. So you can't just like cut off public opinion and you've got to only look at the data from 2021. You've got to look at the data from the start of the war. But even if you were to go off that data, there's still nothing pre-invasion that would indicate that the majority of the people in the Donbass supported being part of Russia. The only place where you could find anything where that is conceivable is in Crimea, and even then, pre-2014 invasion, that's still a shaky claim.
But let's take one of the previous elections. We are going to see Ukraine is divided.
No, not this bullshit again. Oh my God. Okay, so I'm sorry. I've done this so many times. You know, what he's probably about to talk about is the 2010 election between Petro Poroshenko and well, it wasn't Petro Poroshenko. It was Yanukovych and I forget the exact other opposition figure. But the election indicated that in the West, there was much more support against Yanukovych, and in the East, there was much more support for Yanukovych. And the way people calculate this is people voted for Yanukovych because they love Russia, and people voted for the other guys because they hated Russia. And this dumbs down not only Ukrainian politics, it takes away the lack of reform of the Ukrainian system, making some people decide, it's time to try somebody else. It doesn't talk about his ties to the environment in the region and the clientele and the handouts that were done that helped him build up support. It doesn't talk about like anything else. It's just the people were going to the ballot box and they're like, this is the pro-Russia vote and this is the anti-Russia vote, which is silly. It also doesn't include what happened 4 years after that. Because if you vote for Yanukovych, because you are, let's say you're much more conservative, or whatever your position and reason is to support Yanukovych, you can support Yanukovych completely separate from the idea that you believe that Ukraine should be a part of Russia. You might think that Ukraine should have a good relationship with Russia. You might think that, oh, actually, you know, we shouldn't be that confrontational with the Russians. But equating supporting a political candidate with we should be part of Russia. I vote for a pro-Canada dude, a dude who wants to be friendly with Canada. That does not mean I want to be part of Canada. And I think that equivocation of vote for this candidate equaling like support for Russia or not support for Russia, I think that's a huge leap of logic. And number two, there's been plenty of elections since 2010. Why do people ignore the elections since 2010? Like in the last election, Zelensky won all of the eastern Ukrainian districts. Why wouldn't we use that election result? Why is it only this election result? Why wouldn't the Russian annexation and invasion of Crimea, the shooting down of the Dutch civilian airliner, the annexation of Donetsk and Luhansk, the destruction of the Ukrainian, of the Baptist church in Ukraine and the expulsion of those people, why would none of this affect the Ukrainian perspective on the Russians? Even if we were to accept this framing, which I do not.
I did. To if you see the voting stuff, the people that are closer to Russia, they are voting the people that are Russian speaker and they support Russia, and also the people that closer to.
When you say support Russia, Yanukovych's pitch was that he wanted to be friendly with the Russians, not that we're going to make Ukraine Russia. He did not campaign in 2010 on making Ukraine Russia. Actually, you want to know what Yanukovych campaigned on in 2010? He campaigned on joining the association agreement with the European Union. It was either 2010 or 2012. I forget the exact date of the election. But he was campaigning on joining the association agreement. He then tries to join the association agreement, fulfill that promise. The Russians step in, stop him. He pulls it out in the middle of the night. That starts the Euromaidan, and the rest is history. So, I mean, maybe that could be one of many things that could have motivated people to vote one way or the other way. Again, we're really simplifying Ukrainian politics here. I mean, like, I'm trying to think of an equivalent that we could, I talked about Canada, but it'd be like, for example, somebody being like, oh, they voted for Trump. They voted for Trump because they want more restrictions on immigration. That could be one reason, but there's so much more to this than just that. There's one reason, but there's so much else. And it's not even a good comparison. I don't think there's really a good comparison I could make because the geopolitics is so different.
Kiev, they are voting more pro-Ukrainian people. So you can see actually in the votings of the previous elections, a lot of the times, if you go back, that what I'm saying is actually true. And what you're saying that it is, what I'm saying doesn't exist, we actually see it in a lot of, and we have a lot of evidence that there is a lot of Russian, pro-Russian Ukrainians closer. And if we make referendum in this region, probably they will vote to be to Russia, but they feel
he is so confident in this. Mariupol, the Russians were pushed out of it back in 2014. They were pushed out of it. The city could have stopped Azov from doing that. They didn't. The city was, why would Mariupol want what happened to it? Like, even look at the local administration in Mariupol, the repair companies. What's happening in Mariupol? And it's not heavily reported. There's some outlets that have done some reporting on it. But the people who have been hired to do the rebuilding in Mariupol, a lot of these people are awarded contracts by friends, and they're starting these companies from scratch, starting rebuilding. They hire contractors, don't even pay the contractors fully, so the contractors will stop like mid-job, or they do pay them, but they're not good contractors, do a bad job. And a lot of buildings are still not repaired. People have been living 2-3 years without a roof, without heating, without water. And the ones that are repaired, they're like, a lot of them are half repaired.
I feel that whatever we're talking about now is irrelevant to the larger point of, like, should we help Ukraine? Because ultimately, even if there's a bunch of people in Russia or who feel more Russian and wish they were part of Russia, that there's just no, it doesn't matter, right? Because they're in a sovereign nation with a border, and that's just not how it works, right? So that point doesn't interest me.
Can we go one step further behind and see how this war started? What I believe happened, the United States, which, by the way, I love the United States, but I don't like the foreign policy of the last couple of years of the United States because they're starting a lot of the wars, and is not in the war, and is not to the benefit of the United States, and is not to the benefit of the war. So in 2014, with all this Crimea and all this stuff, the United States tried to make this war, and I think United States is trying now with this war to make Russia a lot.
This is negative knowledge. He has negative knowledge about the war. Like, people start from a baseline about, like, somebody starts from nothing. If you know nothing about a topic, that's not the worst position you can be in. If you know, like, I know nothing about, no, that's not true. I actually know a decent amount about CNC machines. I know nothing about, I don't know, dirt bike racing. I know nothing about adjusting the dirt bikes. I know nothing about dirt bikes. That's not the worst position to be in if I wanted to get into dirt bikes. The worst position to be in was if I had a friend named Jerry who swore he knew so much about bikes, and he was offering me like weird custom Chinese fuels that he's sure is going to give me an extra boost to win the race. And he's telling me, oh, you don't need to adjust that bolt. That bolt actually doesn't matter. It's like an extra bolt. You can just leave that off the bike. I'm getting negative knowledge to the point where I'm actually going to have to unlearn all this stuff just to get back to where I was before. That is where he's at. The United States government wanted anything but a war in Ukraine in 2014. And the United States government was trying to tamper down the protesters and get them to accept the deal that the Yanukovych regime was offering. People talk about the Victoria Nuland phone call. Listen to the whole thing. Don't listen to the clips you just see on YouTube. Listen to the full phone call. And the character of the conversation is, we need to get the Ukrainians to agree to a deal. We want to deal with the Russians for a future election in Ukraine. We need to get the protesters to accept the deal. What did the protesters do? They rejected the deal. They didn't want a deal. They demanded the immediate resignation of Yanukovych, and then Yanukovych fled the country after his police murdered a bunch of people. How is that us starting the war? Is it starting the war because we funded some civil society organizations? Is it starting the war because we supported the protesters? Is it supported as in verbally supported? John McCain talked on the ground. We didn't shoot anybody. We didn't kill anybody. It was the Yanukovych regime that killed people. How did we start the war? How did we start the war? You can't just say we started the war and just leave it there. You have to, you got to expand on that. Is it the idea that we did a CIA coup that you hear all the time?
Weaker. So the United States is like the playing field, the Ukraine.
Like, if you wanted to blame America for anything, you'd have to go back further to like the Budapest Memorandum and like making agreements more solid, or, you know, maybe like you could talk. Point is, you don't start in or if you were, the critique that I would make is that Barack Obama did not show enough dedication in holding by the Budapest Memorandum. My critique would probably be in the exact opposite direction of his. So we are on two totally different planets.
And the Ukrainian people and United
well, hold
States
on, I got to stop you. I got to stop you right there.
Yes, please.
Russia is the aggressor. They invaded Ukraine. You can't blame Ukraine or America or anyone for helping them. Russia's the aggressor. They started this war. They're every day deciding to continue the war. They are the aggressor, and if you want to, I think it's important to keep that at the top of your mind.
I agree with you, but let's see the bigger picture. Like, if you are Russia, I hate also the Russian policy that they are invading. I don't like them. But
well,
if
one's
you are
better
Russia,
than the other, right? I mean, one is certainly more evil.
It's coming, and the United States is coming to close to your borders, and it's trying to put military bases, trying to control you.
Oh yeah, that's true. The Kiev military base, where we had all those F-35 jets stationed in 2014. There's no American military bases in Ukraine. Ukraine was no closer to joining NATO in 2022 than it was in joining NATO in 2008. It had not convinced Turkey. It had not convinced Hungary. It still hasn't convinced Hungary. It hadn't convinced Germany. It hadn't convinced the French. And it hadn't convinced the United States. There was no imminent threat of Ukraine joining NATO. So there has to be more than just the idea that American military bases were like 5 seconds away from being next to the Donetsk airport, because that wasn't happening.
I don't find so unreasonable that Russia is doing
Okay, so
this as well. If we're talking,
So do you think that Russia? Hold on.
the United States is forced. Yes,
I gotta
please.
say. So if you're,
Ethan, I love you, by the way.
I love you
and
too. I love
this
you too.
debate.
No, this is good. I like the spirit of debate.
I have no reason to love him. So I have no love. I just have no reason. And so far, I've heard nothing. Good.
If you're saying we have presence on their border, do you justify Russia invading Poland? I mean, would you say, hey, let's not help Poland, let's not help Finland, let's not help
I
the
don't
Baltics?
justify Russia invading Ukraine.
Well, no, I think Ethan just got a good point. Ethan actually just asked a great question. If you're saying that the support just continues the bloodshed, would this policy not logically extend to our different allies? Would it not extend to Finland or Poland? Like maybe it would be, I mean, our bases in Poland, you know, are closer to Russia than they are closer to the United States. So if Russia was to invade, would the best thing to do be to take out the bases, maybe give Russia a little piece of Poland here and make some compromise to just end the bloodshed quickly? Where does this stop? Is there any red line that he would draw in the sand for, you know, ceasing the bloodshed and having peace for peace sake?
I don't justify it.
So if
But
we
I'm just saying that I'm just saying the fact, and the only solution is like here that we are is to start peace talks, not more funding.
how can you have peace talks
the
with someone
war?
who's trying to kill you? They make the decision every day to
But
remain
also
the
the
aggressor.
United States tried to put some
But they're not
military bases. So-
aggressor. It's so totally
But
different.
if you're trying to put something force your military bases next to that, it's like
When we say force your military bases next to them, I also don't accept this framing. Force who? Force the Ukrainians? And the Ukrainians would have to agree to join NATO and would have to agree to the base being on the territory for that to happen. And that still hasn't happened. Even after the Russians have invaded Ukraine in 2022, we have still not gotten Ukraine into NATO. Like, so when we say, like, we didn't force Finland into NATO, they voluntarily joined. So don't use the word force. Say that the bases are there, but don't use the word force, because it equalizes and puts it on the same. Like when the Russians invade Ukraine and start forcing their bases, destroying these churches and replacing them with military bases. This is force. They're forcing this on Ukraine. Us coming to the Ukrainians and them asking to join NATO would be us forcing them. These are two totally different situations. The ethics of this are totally different. Don't equivocate.
like you are also. It's not fight between good and bad. It's fight between two evils. This is what I'm saying.
Again, everything's morally gray. The people who are against Ukraine, most of the time, the argument has to be made from a position of there's no good guy here. There's no, defender, attacker, offensive war, defensive war. It all doesn't matter. War is war. It is what it is. Fight for nothing. It's just like that aide to Viktor Orban, If we would have been invaded by the Russians, we'd just roll over. It just feels like there's nothing you're willing to fight for. And it's just based on the idea that everything is empire. So, everything's morally gray. This war, that war, there's nothing really worth fighting for because war is war. It's very shallow.
Saying.
Okay, but by that logic, then we shouldn't help Poland if they get invaded. So if Russia, hold on, let me ask you this. So if Russia, if Russia invades Poland, just straight up, they're like, we're going to take this. So if Poland asks for help from America and Europe, should we not offer it?
Poland, by the way, is in the European Union, and so NATO is forced kind of to help Poland.
Not an answer.
So we will help.
That's not an answer. I think this is like the conversation Destiny had with Kim Iverson, where they know that if you can justify one military intervention logically or ethically, then you could use that as an extension to justify others, right? And now that doesn't necessarily mean you could do that with if I justify a defensive war in Ukraine, I can't extend that to justify an offensive war into Iraq. Like, these are two totally different things. The ethics for it are different. But his rejection is based on the idea that funneling weapons into any war just continues the violence, and violence is bad. So then you have to challenge him on, okay, so you're saying like there's no military intervention you'd ever support, and if there is, then you've got to find the thing that differentiates the ethics that allows that intervention to be different when it comes to Ukraine. It can't be when it comes to, well, it's defensive. Well, both wars are defensive. Well, it's rebuilding empire. Both wars are rebuilding empire. Well, it would be the war crime. Both, there's tons of war crimes. So you'd have to find what would be different, or the standard that he holds here that doesn't apply to Ukraine. And I think that's part of the reason he dodged around it. Maybe he'll answer it now. Maybe I'm wrong.
Poland as European Union and NATO and United States because of these reasons.
That wasn't an answer. He dodged it. Now my mind's just racing a little bit, but Ethan has to grab him on this. He has to be aggressive on this. His question was simple. Should we defend Poland? Not, are we legally obliged to defend Poland? Like if somebody came to me and said, Dylan, if a little girl gets kidnapped in front of you and stuffed into a white van, would you support calling the police, like doing something, like going in there and helping that little girl? And then I respond like, well, legally it's illegal to do that. So the government would do something. The police would have to go help her. I'd be super suspicious of that. I'd be like, wow, that's a weird way. You could have said yes. You could have said yes. You could have said no. That'd be a weird answer, but you could have said no. Saying that just sounds like you're dodging something. It sounds like you're shifting away from something. You're trying to slick around, smooth.
But there's still military bases, so your justification was that because there's a military presence on their border.
Okay, let's go one step back again and let's see. I am
Difficult question. Move away.
against both, or I'm against the invasion.
He doesn't like this framing because this framing boils down to like the fact that this guy probably, using this logic, could object to any type of support for any country at any time.
But here that we are is the only good solution for the Ukrainian people for them to stop buying and negotiate a peace agreement.
dodging.
It's good for them and it's good for everyone in the world, because this also has potential for World War III and nuclear weapons, and nobody wants this. Like, this is dangerous stuff.
Yeah. However, I mean,
But also, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons under the idea that this would not happen. So if we were to abandon them, the international standard of setting of, hey, give up your nukes and your territory is forfeit, is not something that's going to discourage people away from nuclear weapons. And the more nation states that have nuclear weapons, the more opportunities for a disaster to occur. And also, if a nation state like Russia invades, falls flat on their face, uses nukes, and then the threat of those nukes gets them the victory, what's the lesson that's being sent? Is that going to encourage people to go get nukes to settle the territorial disputes with their neighbors, or disencourage them? Like, we can't just think about this crisis. You need to think about the crises into the future.
I mean, listen, Russia.
And also, the Ukrainian people are losing in the battlefield all the time.
That's
so
not
they
true.
are just that's
Did you ask
true.
the
So they are-
Ukrainians what they
General, this guy has military experience. This guy right here, okay, he was the commander of the air attack on Yugoslavia during the genocides, okay? This man knows what he's talking about.
want?
He personally bombed the Chinese embassy.
But nobody, that's my question. Nobody is asking them. Is whatever
I
Zelensky.
think the Ukrainians don't. I'm pretty sure we
If-
can say conclusively Ukrainians don't want to end
the
give
Ukrainians
their
doesn't
country
have
to
a
Russia.
voice now, especially the people that are closer to Russia. But anyways, for these reasons, I'm not the world expert on this stuff, but I research a lot of stuff, and for these reasons, we voted for peace talks. And also, I said, maybe guys, truly, I mean.
By the way, like, let's set up this scenario. Let's do it the way he wants, okay? Which seems to be, you stop sending weapons to Ukraine, it forces Ukraine to negotiate with the Russians. We don't force the Iranians to change anything, the North Koreans, because we can't. We don't have the influence over them to do so. So they keep sending Russia the weapons. Russia invests 40% of its economy, 40% of its budget, probably more next year, into its military production, into its armed forces. It's spending more on the military than healthcare, like pension, like all these different things combined. It's crazy. You can actually look at the data. I posted the data the other day because I thought it was fascinating. This is a graph made by Bloomberg from the recent draft budget. Look at this. Their national defense stuff is more than their social policy, domestic economy, education, and healthcare. You add domestic security and national defense together, which overlap, of course. That's more than economy, education, healthcare, and social policy combined, right? And then you go to Ukraine's side. They no longer get weapon shipments from abroad. They're no longer getting support from abroad to add pressure to try to get them to negotiate. So then you get the Ukrainians to go to the Russians. What stops the Russians from saying, wait, you're not getting weapons anymore? Wait, you're not getting the backing of the West anymore? I'm still getting stuff from North Korea. I'm still getting stuff from Iran. I should press the advantage. I've got more artillery. I've got more men. I've got a bigger air force. I've got the support of so many different countries. And maybe with the West backing off, maybe the Chinese will be a little bit more bold in the support they'll provide, and it won't just be secret drone programs, it'll be public drone programs. What stops the Russians from just pressing the advantage, saying, we've already been fighting this for 3 years, let's do another one, take Dnipro, take back Kherson, take Kramatorsk, take Slovansk at the very least. Hell, maybe even press the Volchansk offensive again if they don't have the shells, enough 155 millimeter shells to supply the artillery guns we gave them. And by the way, if we stop sending them the ammo, they will have artillery systems that are just literally useless. They're going to be cannibalizing these artillery teams, giving them rifles, and then if the war continues and the Russians press the advantage and make new demands, as is often the case with war, when you have a better position, you make stronger demands. With new demands, the Ukrainians won't accept, and then the death toll will skyrocket. Why? Because the Ukrainians won't have good armor to protect their units and armored units. They won't have ammunition to support the infantry on the line that are being hit with these frontline attacks. They won't have air defense systems to protect Kiev, to protect Kharkiv, to protect Kherson. I mean, Kherson's already constantly being bombed by the Russian army. Civilians are being hunted by drones. And I mean, I saw that firsthand when I was in Kherson, but it's being reported on a lot by locals, not a lot by the international press. But like this situation that he's drawing up, and I think there's a likelihood it could intensify the bloodshed by just making one side losing an advantage to the fact that the other side would then press the advantage, and then Ukraine's in a worse position. And then let's say we realize the error of our ways once the Russians start marching even faster and we've changed nothing, and we then recommit back into support, then you've got two problems. Number one, what you just did is have a big pause of support for no reason, getting a bunch of people killed, just like the pause we did with the aid before had impacts during the Battle of Avdiivka. And you've changed nothing substantially when it comes to negotiating. Besides, all you've done is you've given them more leverage. And the other thing is, if the West was willing to crack before, why wouldn't they be willing to crack again? All you would do is give more confidence to the Russians who are pressing on in this war. I don't know if he's thought past step one. If you want to negotiate peace, you don't start it by undermining your negotiating position.
Maybe I'm wrong, but we have this data, we're doing research, and this is what we have to vote, and we're voting about a lot of other things. So this is what the data that I'm presenting and I researched, and this is what the decision we took. And this is what we voted. And I think I still stand by what I voted.
So you say that you're afraid of escalation. Now, Russia has been grabbing territory and we did nothing about it. For example, when it took Crimea, everybody stood by and said, don't do that again. Similar, by the way, to how the Nazis started grabbing territory and everyone was quick to appease them to avoid war and escalation. But the truth is, we don't know for sure, but if Europe made a stand against that earlier, it may have prevented war. It may have lessened the severity of the war. So this assumption that trying to prevent Russian expansion is going to escalate, I think is ahistorical, because if they see that NATO and America is weak on this, what's going to stop them from going north and taking all these countries that, because, you know, Putin has expressed his interest.
What's going to stop United States? United States did 8 wars.
What the it's whataboutism. It's nonsensical whataboutism. The Poles do not want the Americans to leave. The Finns do not want the Americans to leave. The Ukrainians want the Russians to leave. That's the difference.
Couple of it. And they are doing the same thing in Afghanistan. They are doing so.
We left Afghanistan. We left. We're out of Afghanistan. The Taliban took over. Women can't speak in public anymore. Okay, we left. We're out of there. We're gone. Okay, that the Russians should leave Ukraine. What is it? Just like Afghanistan. Afghanistan happened after 9/11. There was no Ukrainian 9/11 in Russia. It's not even a good comparison. I mean, Iraq would have been somewhat closer, not exactly the same, because we still didn't annex Iraq and say Iraq is now the 51st state of the Union.
How many, the same thing.
Wait.
They are
Stop
going
America
and
from
bombing
what?
from expanding. So it's both of the two countries trying to expand and do
Hold on. America.
By the way, like, you can find things that America did that are bad, but he's not responding to the questions. Every time he gets cornered on something, like, wait, what about if Poland gets invaded? He just says, well, there would be NATO, and he doesn't explain his position or whether he would support, and then he just shifts around. He gets put in the corner a little bit here where he has to, answer a tough question, pivot to America has done bad things, right? America's not invading Spain or Portugal or the Netherlands. They're not launching an army into Europe to do this. The only country that can conceivably do this is Russia. They're the only country that is destabilizing the post-World War II peace with physical force. They are the only ones doing that. This is the largest war in Europe since World War II. We didn't launch it. We're talking about European affairs right now. Why do we need to shift to the invasion of Iraq, which ended years ago now, in order to have this discussion?
America doesn't. They're not trying to annex it.
We are
Hold on.
living in an anarchist system of countries, and the stronger kind of wins. So because the United States is now the strongest country in the world, so they are doing whatever they want. And there is nobody
There's a big difference between annexing a country and territory and making an agreement with the country to have a base there. I mean, it's a mutual agreement by the two countries. You're saying that that's the same as Russia taking over land and invading a sovereign country?
Don't look so baffled. That's the framing he made. He chose the framing. Don't look baffled when they ask, like, wait, there's a difference here. What? Well, I didn't say there wasn't any differences, just that,
I'm sorry, you said that in Afghanistan people wanted to, the United States.
I'm talking about in Ukraine.
Agreement.
Listen, that's a war that we could.
By the way, the Russians helped us invade Afghanistan, by the way. Just throwing that out there. So if you want to pin that on us, you got to pin it on them too.
All agree was bad. I'm talking about Ukraine being invaded by Russia.
So now it's the same thing that what United States did in Afghanistan. Now Russia is doing. I'm like,
not the same fucking thing. There is no Ukrainian 9/11. What the Ukrainians poisoned the national Russian board supply, killed millions. That didn't happen. There was not even like an apartment bombing that precipitated the invasion of Chechnya. There's no equivalent. You can't make the comparison. And we never annexed Afghanistan. We never said Afghanistan has always been American clay. George Washington wrote the Constitution in Kabul. That never happened. When George Washington chopped down the cherry tree, the tree's cherry floated across the ocean and landed in Kandahar, which means that Kandahar is by natural extension in our version of the Tucker Carlson interview. That never happened, right? You can't make these comparisons.
Against of both. But the only good solution...
No, it's not. America wasn't annexing Afghanistan.
Ethan is doing better than I expected, actually. I mean, still, like, there's more stuff he could throw out there, but I think he's doing not too bad.
Afghanistan isn't the 51st state of America.
English?
What?
Teach me a bit English. What annexing means?
They're not the 51st state of America. We didn't.
I swear I didn't pre-watch this.
Take Afghanistan. It's not like American state now, like Russia wants to do to Ukraine.
But because now the troops are Heathrow, you did at Heathrow 5 years ago. So
what?
And you have a lot of United States has a lot of military bases. 80 countries has a lot of military bases.
Most of those, but those are mutually beneficial bases that are obviously negotiated with the host country for.
I mean, you can negotiate, you could debate how much they're mutually beneficial depending on each country. But in Europe, like, there's not many Europeans that are complaining about the fact that they're covered by America's nuclear umbrella. In fact, during the majority of the Cold War, a lot of the European debate was, is America as dedicated to our defense as we want them to be? Would the Americans be willing to risk nuclear war and the destruction of New York for Paris, or New York for Berlin during the Berlin crisis. I mean, this is not new.
Security assurances for aid and all this kinds of stuff. So they're not like forcing their way in. A lot of these bases are to both parties' benefit.
Anyway, so
go ahead. You seem shocked by that.
No, I don't seem shocked by that. But I said what I believe. You said what you believe. It's up to the people that are watching to decide. Maybe I'm wrong. Probably I'm wrong. But this is what I believe. And I'm just saying what I believe with the stuff that I research and I know. So, and I'm the member of the European Parliament, and that's my responsibility to vote whenever we have topics to vote about Venezuela, about Ukraine, and all this stuff. So this is me, simple, trying to do my best to represent what I believe, and also what the people, which is very important, what the people of Europe want. And the people of Europe seem that they don't want to keep funding the war.
That's not the vote represented.
But
didn't it lose like 200 to 1 or 300 to 100 or something?
So the people of my country that they voted for me, that's important as well to represent the people that you voted.
Well, yeah, but you just wait, no, back.
Don't want to keep. Very important. What the people of Europe.
Nah, you didn't say the people. You didn't say the Cypriots. You said the people of Europe. Nah, you claim to speak for all Europeans.
Want. And the people of Europe seem that they don't want to keep funding the war.
That's not the vote represented.
But
didn't it lose like 200 to 1 or 300 to 100 or something?
So the people of my country that they voted for me, that's important as well to represent the people that you voted for.
For sure, of course.
So I'm doing what the people that voted for me as well. But there is a reasoning behind it as well. So yeah, that's pretty much, I think, about this debate. But you can ask me another interesting things about the European Parliament, about my life. Well, about my smile.
Well, I have more questions about it because it is important, right? Yeah. You said, for example, in this video that you can never achieve peace through war. But that's completely ahistorical, right? I mean, just look in Europe in recent history, Nazi Germany. There was really no option, right? War was inevitable. Japanese reunification, Chinese reunification.
Japanese reunification? I don't know what he means by that. I mean, maybe he means like the war with the Japanese. Maybe he means, I don't know.
Unification, even Roman, wars resulted in hundreds of years of peace. So.
Like, oh, he means like the Japanese, like hundreds of years of wars that eventually they were united under one flag, and then compared to that, of course, it was very. Yes, that is true. I was just thinking Cold War. I was in a totally different era. I was thinking World War II still.
Do you believe that some wars need to be fought, especially defensive wars?
Ethan, you want so much beef. I love it. You are amazing. I want to give you a big hug.
This is important, though. This is a serious thing. I mean, you're talking about like how many millions of people in Ukraine who are like, being victimized by Russian tyranny.
Okay, I'm against the war, and I don't think peace will be achieved through war.
You didn't answer the question. You just restated what he said in the video.
Maybe my is like too much love and not a utopia world that doesn't exist. But I think this is.
Yeah, you have to live in the real world, okay? We don't live at Woodstock. We live on planet Earth.
What I believe, we cannot achieve war, peace through war.
So if we stop funding Ukraine, let's say we do what you want, and America and Europe stops giving aid to Ukraine. So what happens then?
Which hopefully what Trump wants to do if he gets elected. By the way, I don't like Trump. I don't like Kamala Harris. I think you guys can do better to have. But anyway, so what
Trump happens? What happens to Ukraine if we stop all funding and weapons and stuff like that?
Well, I think people will stop dying, and they will be forced to reach to an agreement.
The agreement. And, I mean, there's Russia.
Why do we assume that the Russians wouldn't be like, great, the West just caved, let's take Ukraine? Why? What would stop the Russians from being like, we just went through all this sanction, all this bloodshed, and we're talking about Putin's 70 years old. He's not going to be able to rule for another 20 years. He's going to die someday. Like, if there was an opportunity to take Ukraine, like, maybe he'll restart the war in the future. Definitely if Ukraine is forced to demilitarize or, doesn't have an alliance, there's nothing stopping the Russians from invading again, which the demands that they're making would mean that would build that pathway for them. But I mean, what would stop him from being, I'm 70, I want to build my mark on the Russian Empire. I believe, and he said this, that essentially Ukraine could only exist as an extension of Russia. What would stop him from continuing to push the initiative?
Would take over the entire country. There'd probably be massive civilian
not
deaths.
the entire country. To some regions that they might be happy actually that they're under.
Again, he's in La La Land. What is Donetsk like? I want to hear him describe what occupied Donetsk is like. Let me hear the paradise of occupied Donetsk. Also, if you guys are wondering, like, how that because he just says they're forced to stop fighting. There's no description of like the exact deal would be made, how you would convince the Ukrainians to do that, why the Ukrainians wouldn't immediately tear down their government if they sold off like cities like Mariupol. Like, none of this is like being broken down. But let's tune into Trump and see his plan, because he suggested Trump might, maybe Trump will bring it about. Let's hear Trump's plan.
I disagree, but I will say this. I believe I will be able to make a deal between President Putin and President Zelensky quite quickly.
But what does that look like? What does that look like? What does that?
I don't want to tell you what that looks like.
Oh, come on, dude. They have no clue what they're doing. They have no idea what they're doing. Ira, thank you so much for the raid. He has no idea. He has no idea, man. He's just gonna order the deal. He's just gonna deal. There'll be a deal. There'll be a deal. There'll be a deal.
Russian occupation.
So they want to be. I can tell you, Ukrainians do not want to be invaded and occupied. I can tell you that for sure.
They don't want to be invaded. They hate the war, but they are not. They are not going to be that.
So what happens? So what happens to Ukraine? What happens to Ukraine if we stop?
It's not going to be that bad. Again, I gotta hear from him what he thinks occupied Ukrainian territory is like. What's the day-to-day? What's that life like? The job opportunities of future occupied Luhansk.
Stop funding them. Also, what if Margot Robbie was Ukrainian?
To diplomacy. They're going to force to diplomacy.
What's diplomacy? They're losing the war. It's defeat. You don't get. There's no diplomacy in defeat.
Be forced to negotiate.
What negotiate? What? It's Russia winning the war.
No, they can negotiate stuff and peace talks.
Why should Russia?
You can talk with no ammo. Yes, I can have a long conversation with my burglar when I'm tied to a chair with no gun.
Negotiate with the loser.
To end the war.
Russia's there to take it all. They're going to kill massive civilians, and there's going to be tons of social unrest there because the Ukrainians fucking hate Russia. They're going to probably kill Zelensky, and it would be total chaos and pandemonium. It would just be a total humanitarian disaster. Why would Russia negotiate with Ukraine after they defeat them in war? I don't even know what that means.
Ethan, you are amazing to keep fighting about this topic. I love you for this. But I'm curious also to see what the comments are saying. They are saying that who won the debate? Can we make a poll to see who won the debate?
I don't think.
So is his whole life just like when he puts on his pants in the morning? Does he take a picture of all the pants, like pull the pant? Like, who cares what the polls say? Who cares what the comments say? Okay, just make your points. Just make your points. The public gauging their support for something doesn't determine what's right. Okay, the public can be wrong. The public, quite frankly, can be quite stupid. Okay, the poll means nothing.
I don't think we.
If you're trying to indicate who wins an election, the polls are important. When you're trying to take what's moral and what's not moral, the polls matter very little.
Listen, what if Margot Robbie was Ukrainian? What if she was in Ukraine right now? What would you do?
No, can you do it? Let's do it. It will be fun.
No, I mean, we didn't really have a full conversation about it.
But we did. We're talking for a long time.
To him, this is a very long conversation about it. Really? Really? Well, now I know that. Okay, if this is a long time, then I can now imagine what long and extensive research is.
So, but
Come on, man, do it a favor for me.
No, I don't want to do it. It's not about that.
But it's not about that. Also, what the people think as well. Maybe not who won the debate, but what the people in the chat.
Okay, so let's do the poll like this. Let's do the poll like this.
Stop funding Ukraine or keep funding Ukraine?
Yes. Should we let Ukraine fall to Russian tyranny? Yes or no? But that's
No,
accurate.
it's not like that.
But that's accurate.
No,
Not
that's
like that.
But this is. But I told you, a lot of the people on the sites that they are occupied now,
I
they
feel like
don't
that's
hate
hearsay.
Russians.
I feel like that's hearsay.
Can we do this simple? Should we keep funding the war? Yes or no?
Should we let Ukraine fall to Russian tyranny? That's so accurate, though.
Which version am I doing?
That one. That's the one. He wants
you
a
sure?
poll. This is my
No.
show.
Okay.
No.
It's my show, Fidias.
Marco Robbie.
Fuck you.
Should we let Ukraine
You
fall
know.
to
And do you think Putin is a dictator?
But I think also Biden is a dictator.
Get him out of here. Get him out of here. Put him back on YouTube. Somebody put him in a digital prison cell and just keep him in the YouTube Shorts category. Get him out of here. Get him out of here. Come on, dude. I can't take this seriously, man. You can't join the EU Parliament and be like, I'm a YouTuber and I'm gonna do serious politics now, and then be like the dictator. I mean, when you think about it, like everyone's kind of a dictator. In fact, you know, I think he's a dictator too. You know, I'm a dictator. I'm Squidward. He's Squidward. We're all dictators.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Oh my God.
That's silly.
Well-
hold on.
Well, all these wars that they are doing.
Well, I can just tell you that
Wars is dick. What is his like peacenik fetish? I don't like all wars. No wars can lead to peace. You know, immediately end any war. Just immediately, like whatever the result, like just end a war because you know what dying is bad. If you start a war, you're a dictator. If you supply a side of a war, you're a What is this? Like these are like words with definitions. They're not just things you attach to stuff you don't like. It's like when I hear people use the word war crime, it's just no, that's just using a drone is not a war crime. You just terrified by modern warfare. That's what that is.
he was elected democratically. I mean, that pretty much puts.
Also, Putin was elected
Are
democratically.
you being for real right
Oh
now?
my
You think
God.
those elections
Well,
are
if
serious?
I don't believe that they are like what they present, them 80% that Putin.
Look at, like, for example, he talked about referendums in occupied territory. Soldiers went door to door with guns, getting people to fill the back. Like, that was a rigged referendum in occupied territory, both in Crimea and in the rest of the territories, right? I mean, like, that's not democracy, man. Could you imagine a poll worker comes to your house with a machine gun, and you know which answer they want you to give, and then they hand you a piece of paper, tell you to vote while they look at you? Are you crazy, man?
Putin won, but I actually believe that 60% of the Russians like Putin and they will vote for him.
But that doesn't mean he's not a dictator. People can like dictators and still dictators. Hitler was probably liked by the majority of the German public, but that wasn't because, number one, the German public was being manipulated by propaganda and otherwise. It wasn't just that, but that was definitely a big factor. If there is no opposition that's allowed after the Reichstag fire, and he's got emergency powers, and he controls all the press and the institution, and he's got these new tools like TV, well, not TV necessarily, but the movie projectors and the visual propaganda to manipulate the public, stuff that the public has no experience in dealing with. To them, seeing those films, even if they're just the same tanks going around in circles, like, that's reality to them. Like, but even if we put all that aside, having majority support does not mean that you're not a dictator. There has to be a choice that the public can make to say no.
Maybe they are a bit.
So you believe that
Yes, don't let them fall. Okay, I will vote for don't let them.
Oh, you voted for me. You support my position.
Wow.
Fid, I think you voted for my position.
Marco Robbie.
Yes, but
No,
also
literally,
we have
okay.
we have 22%, which is let them. But this is framed wrongly. But you see, but even with framing wrongly, it's
23%.
like 23%.
That's a big loss. That's a significant loss.
Okay, you are the winner. You are
I
the
don't care
champion.
about winning. Let's help. Let's stand up for the. But to say that America.
But I actually believe that
You think
I'm
Biden's a
standing up for the
dictator?
Ukraine people. Well,
You know what? If he stands with the Ukrainian people, he should come here to Kyiv. Just come here to go speak to Ukraine. Go tell them like what you're saying. Like, hey, I hear that like a lot of the Ukrainians here support Russia, and I also like America started the war back in 2014. What do you think of this? You just go do that. You know, you're a YouTuber. Record the results. See how it goes. Hell, don't even do it here. Go to Kramatorsk and do it. Go into Eastern Ukraine. You can still go there.
what they are doing to Russia and to Ukraine and all this stuff that they are trying. I think a lot of wars that they started in the last couple of years. So I don't think it's very democratic to start. But because we are living in an anarchic war, is the most powerful one in the country can do whatever they want. They don't have consequences. But by the way, I'm against. By the way, people against the.
How can you describe yourself as maybe I'm a utopian, and then the utopian model you propose is anarchy where big states can bully small states, and it is what it is? Okay, is he like an IR guy? I'm hearing like these IR terms. Is this a Mearsheimer thing? Did he listen to the Mearsheimer YouTube video that everybody else listened to, or did he like read some IR books? I don't know.
United States foreign policy and also Russian foreign policy.
So you say,
but I think here China wins the foreign policy championship because they are against wars. They are becoming stronger. They are just trading with other
China's selling weapons
countries.
to Russia? Am I wrong?
Yes, I think that they are, but I don't think officially. But I think they are giving weapons to, and also probably North Korea is giving weapons to Russia for the war, and probably Iran, which I'm not also against. I don't.
But so here's the thing:
yeah, he's gonna vote against Iran giving weapons to Russia in the EU Parliament. He's gonna do real action.
You're in the Parliament, so you can say, let's stop giving them weapons, but. Like, you want to do that before?
By the way, I don't have any power here in the parliament. I'm one of the 720 MEPs. I'm just making noise a lot in the social media. But actually, my vote doesn't matter because whatever the parties decide themselves, this is what they are doing.
That's what I'm talking about. That's how all of us feel in California. Our votes don't matter anyway.
Yeah.
How you doing? How are you feeling otherwise? Did you get a significant other? Did I see you got a girlfriend?
Yes.
Is that the rest of this, or do they talk about this again?
What does she look like? Look at what.
No, I don't care about any of this.
Yes, bro. They're actually fighting the war.
Okay, back to the war.
Croissant.
Random boys and a croissant. Yes.
Wow, I'm so happy for you, Fidias. It's all coming together, huh? I tell you, your life would be a lot different.
Yes, bro. Honestly, it's like, and also in Palestine and Israel, it's like. Yeah, it's not cool. We have an amazing life, and other people are in the war, and
It's
they are
terrible, yeah.
Yeah. And you know the weird thing about this is like we as politicians, we have all these amazing lives and like no problems and drivers and all this stuff, and we're choosing about the people that are actually fighting the wars. I think it's a bit unfair, to be honest. So yeah, yeah.
And that's why we say no help for them. No, I'm kidding. I mean, I am, but I'm not. So anyway, that's what it is. But it's always nice to talk to you. I mean, listen, you got to.
I like that Ethan didn't budge. Okay, he didn't cave because he was talking to his buddy.
Defend your positions, right? So it's good. It's good practice for you.
Yeah. I'm learning to debate in English.
You've got, yeah, right.
By the way, when I was doing elections in my country, I was not saying anything, any position. I was saying, "Oh, vote for me, I will learn." It was like,
that's awesome. Well, there you go. You're living up to your promise to the people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm learning. But also, like,
but I believe you have a good heart. I know your heart is in the right place. So I'm not accusing you of being a bad person or anything like that. I believe you believe in your heart. You're being genuine.
Yeah, his heart is just not his brain.
Making the right decision for Europe.
By the way, I want to say an interesting fact. Guys, like with the social media, you know how much
power it gives you as a member of the over the other politicians. Because what is politics? Is basically what you can give and what you can take from other people. So a lot of people now want for me to teach them about social media. They want to be in my videos, other members of the European Parliament.
Interesting.
So it's like something that you can give, and they.
Okay, I don't really want to listen to any of this. Okay.
It's like YouTubers coming in this.
Okay, that's enough. I think that people who run for office should know about the issues. Yeah. Yeah, simple as that. Okay, you ready? Okay.